G'day, welcome to Deep and Meaningful with Furzey. So you know the recent fires in Los Angeles. You know how many homes burnt down? Over 16,000. On this episode of the pod, I'm chatting with my very good mate Stefan. Now, he lives in LA and he was very lucky that his house did not burn down, but he's in real estate, so he has a lot of friends and colleagues, people that he's worked with and sold houses to. Their homes were just completely leveled, gone. He was on his motorbike driving through a lot of the areas that were just completely burnt out. He was posting these videos on his story, and he's got some pretty wild stories about what it was like on the ground. Steph was also on episode 2, so right back at the beginning, and he is what can be described as a psychedelic explorer. We also talk about real estate, which is an odd combination. I was interested to know what it's like for someone who carries the wisdom that psychedelics teach you into the what can be very greedy sales world of real estate. He sold some multi-million-dollar mansions in the Hollywood Hills and in Pacific Palisades, and it's a fascinating life that he lives. Things you can expect to learn on this podcast are what it was like on the ground during those crazy Los Angeles fires, what the ideal stack of psychedelics is to take if you're going snowboarding, how to sell a $28 million mansion in the hills, and whether or not it's still worth living in Los Angeles. Steph's a really fascinating guy. I always enjoy chatting with him. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Stefan Pommepuy. Yeah, kratom. Do you know what it is?
Kratom is from the coffee leaf, the coffee plant.
Really?
From what I remember. So don't quote me unless I'm wrong.
Yeah,
but,
and it's from Thailand, right? Is that where?
A lot of it comes from Asia just because of the coffee beans, and I guess South America, I would imagine. But basically, it's a natural opioid, right? And
that's
so
right.
It's a natural version of what a pain pill, any kind of opioid would be. Which is why it's often used to help get people off of opioid addictions.
Right. Because it hits the same receptors, heroin. Right? It's not exactly the
Correct.
same as an opioid, but it gets that same kind of place.
Buzz, exactly. I had a friend that was getting off opioids, addiction to opioid. And for some reason, she was getting very nauseous on it. And so she tried like a little, at the time I was doing the OPMS, the liquid one, which is cool. Tastes a little like ayahuasca actually, but it's harder to kind of like take half a sip. Yeah, I liked it, but it's harder to kind of sip half a little vial. It came in like a little vial like this for $20. This one is the extract, so it's a little bit more pure. I still get the nausea from it sometimes, but for her, for some reason, I guess because her body was kind of detoxing from the opioids, she was it was hard for her. But for the most part, I think people use it for. It could be highly addictive as well, but at least I guess the thought process is that it's better than heroin or some of the other prescriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember having it in the States. I'm pretty sure it's illegal here in Australia because I don't think you can. I'm sure you can get it. I mean, you can get heroin if you really want to. But I'm pretty sure it's illegal. But I remember having it in the States, and apparently there's a threshold where if you have a small amount, it makes you feel energized, and if you have a lot, it makes you feel relaxed, or it's kind of like if you have enough, it kind of has the opposite effect.
There's different ones. You have the green, the red. I think maybe the red is more like the body chill, kind of like sativa versus indica.
Okay,
where one's more like a body chill high, and the other one's more energized.
Right.
I don't feel the difference between them, to be honest. I kind of feel just more in that body high. So for me, it feels a bit more like an indica, like the edible little body high, but without the stoneness factor, right? So sometimes you want that chill, but then you're stoned trying to have a conversation or whatever. If you're somewhere, whereas this, you get that. For me, you get the benefit of that without the mind alteration.
Without being out of it, you physically, yes, that makes sense. Because I remember getting really sick too, like your friend. I'd had too many. And it's just awful. I just felt so nauseous, and I was all floppy, and I was just like I was fine. I could get up and move and everything, but I was like, oh, this is horrible. And I just felt I couldn't be sick, but I just felt like I needed to vomit. And I was like, okay, I've pushed it too far.
And clammy. The only time I get that, or because I didn't realize at the time, I was going out and I popped one, or I drank it. It was a little liquid one, and then went out to the bar or whatever. And right away I ordered like a tequila, whatever. Oh yeah. And I drank that. And, so you're not supposed to, not ideal to mix with alcohol. For me now, if I take it and like 30, 40 minutes later, I'll have a drink, it's fine. But at that time, I remember I got there, I was like, oh, I got this like cold sweat. I'm like, I'll be right back. I went in the car and I sat there for like 30 minutes until it passed, and then I was fine. But you tuck and roll.
Yeah.
But for me now, it's been, I went snowboarding last night, and I like what I find. Well, here are the places I use them. On a flight, if I'm traveling, and I'm coach, for 5-10 hours or whatever, I'll do that because like it kind of relaxes. Or if I have a muscle spasm, which is when it's ideal. But if I'm on the plane, I'm kind of feeling cramped, and you're always like shifting, and you're always like ah. Whereas here, it just relaxes the body. And again, you don't have like this stone high of like you're in your head about the whatever. So it just relaxes my body. Just
the physical effects of it. Yeah. That's a great way to describe it.
The seat. Yeah. And then, or if I'm snowboarding, I'll do kratom and I'll do acid. So the kratom loosens my body and the acid dials me in, right? I feel like super dialed in on the acid. Right? I have to have or something. And I was with my buddy Billy. And we're in Mammoth, and this is the first time I'd snowboard in a long time, and like the first few runs, I'm a little stiff. He's like, blah blah, and then I do the kratom and acid, blah blah blah. Like a couple runs later, it kicks in, and I'm just fucking bombing. He's like, holy shit, dude, what'd you do? Like you had 2 warm-up runs, you haven't snowboarded in like 20 years, and you're like killing it. And I'm like, yeah, man, just because it loosens but like half the time when you injure yourself or when you're you're just stiff, and every bump you're like, your body's tensed up, and that's when you kind of pull something because you're like just cramped up. Whereas here, the body is just loose and I'm feeling confident. And then unlike weed, right, where I would feel a little bit like in my head and paranoid, whatever, my body's loose. And then, like I said, the acid kind of dials me in where I feel like tuned. You see everything, how it is. You're seeing like 5 moves ahead or whatever, kind of like on mushrooms, but with that body high. The right dosing, of course, I'll do like a half kratom, maybe half tab or whatever it is, depending on the day. But certain combinations for me works.
I mean, it sounds, I see, I've never done acid. I've always been.
That's right.
Yeah, I've always been too. I guess I don't know. I guess because I did mushrooms, I've always been kind of concerned about. I'm not concerned. Let me rephrase. I've had this arrogance toward acid because it's it's not natural. It's not made. It's not made by the essence. It's made by man. So I've always had this arrogant attitude towards it. But it's more so just because I'm scared. But it sounds very much like if you get that balance wrong, you could be in a lot of trouble. But if you get it right, and you hit that sweet spot where you're having acid and kratom and then going fucking snowboarding, you're either crushing it or you're just like lying there buried
or you're stuck in the chairlift going around in circles, unable to get off.
Just sitting there shaking.
But it's funny you say that because I obviously had the same thoughts for years. As you know, my path, I started with ayahuasca and then kind of reverse engineered from there. Yeah, and it was always like that. It was all about the sacred plants, the sacred the way that you administer them and all that stuff. And then I did mushrooms after. And so if I know you've had some great experience on mushrooms. With acid, when I finally got to that point, it was actually on my 40th birthday, actually exactly 7 years ago, a few days ago. It's not what people think. People think like, oh, acid, melting faces and all these crazy visuals and all that stuff. It's not necessarily that. It's kind of like depending on how much you do, obviously, it's a bit like the trail or the tail end of a mushroom experience where you're feeling kind of just dialed in, switched on. The difference is, I do agree that you don't have that spiritual component. Like mushrooms can give you kind of that spiritual insight, that those entities, those beings being present and guiding you through something. However, having done mushrooms first, I think where you would benefit from acid is acid is kind of like a blank canvas. You get to paint whatever picture you want on it. I remember I was at Burning Man years into it. Years later, I had brought acid to it. And so, I was on a full tab and I'm kind of like, in it and wired. And I walked up to like this labyrinth in the sand. And I'm like, okay, what is this about? I'll try it. And like you said, with mushrooms, you have that spiritual component to it. With acid, I don't. I feel like almost like the same activation as mushrooms without the guidance, the spiritual guidance. And so I was thinking to myself, well, I know what that spiritual guidance is in the mushroom world. So why don't I just bring that wisdom in the acid world? So I had this whole moment with the labyrinth of like, every time I was getting like, oh, this is dumb, I'll step. No, just commit to it. Just like I would on a mushroom journey where someone would tell me to kind of walk the path, commit to this, blah, blah, blah. And I would kind of like guide myself, bringing the wisdom of mushrooms into the acid experience. And so you kind of create it. But what's nice about acid is that it's clean and it's consistent, right? Whereas mushroom, you sometimes have those waves up and down.
Yeah,
whereas
definitely.
Mushrooms, with acid, you kind of just you kind of get there, and then it's just like.
Oh wow, that's interesting. That's very different, because mushrooms is always. I mean, I don't know about your experience, but every time for me, it is a clear wave. Like, and as it comes up, it goes up, and then like you're up, but you're still, the waves get longer, and then there'll be moments where like I feel like I've come out of it and I'm fine, and then here we go again,
and then you're back. You're back in it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So imagine like one of those peaks or wherever that level is you get to. With mushrooms, and then it just stays there. And so it's a little cleaner in the sense that if you're somewhere a bit more social, or if you're at a concert or Burning Man or certain things where you want that sustained level or that sustained energy, just constant. And then having had the experience that you've had with mushrooms, you can bring that spiritual component, that more depth to the experience. Right. And so, for me, like biking, if I'm biking from here to Santa Monica and back, 20, 30 miles, I'll do like 3-4 sprays, so I have a spray that like each spray is like 1/10. So it's easier to kind of, rather than trying to cut a little tab into a 10th, it's kind of hard to judge. This way it's easier.
That's like, a recipe for disaster. Trying to try and get these perfect measurements on a little tiny square. Because it's super similar to mushrooms, right? Like on the to the chemical level, they're really close, aren't they?
They're both considered psychedelics, right? Molly is as well, even though it has a different ring to it as far as the mental component. That's more of a heart opener. But would be classified as a psychedelic, as opposed to opioids, which is a different class, right? Or uppers and downers. They're all different classes. So if and when the time's ready, and you did explore, you start light, you could do like a half or a quarter or whatever. And if you do feel like that, that lack of connection or spiritual guidance, you could just bring it to it, having had the experience you've had with mushrooms, or not. Like, because, like I said, for me, for the longest time, I was really sticking with, what I felt to be sacred plant medicines. I do think acid has great healing components to it. If done again right and in the right setting with the right intention, even though it doesn't have that natural element that I think we normally seek. But for me, I can justify it in the sense for myself that there's still benefits to be had around it. Whereas like cocaine, which I've never done, because I've never heard a compelling argument as to the benefits it brings in your world. To me, it's a non-negotiable, because I can't justify. Like, I always want to do something where I feel like I could become a better person or have deeper understanding about myself.
Yes.
And that doesn't really open that up. Whereas acid, it can lend to that narrative. Yeah.
The only benefit I can really give to something like cocaine that I can think of from personal experience is there can be an element of connection that you feel in the moment, but even then, it's false. Yeah. So you can at least be present in the moment, there is connection there, and it feels like really deep connection, because you're starting new businesses with people, but it's false. It goes.
But don't you get that? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's not exclusive to cocaine. You can
get
that.
That's the thing. Like, I feel that if I want that heart opener connection, all that stuff, Molly would be my choice, right?
Yeah, it's a far
if I wanted, because the thing I've noticed at parties or whatever with cocaine is like there's always like a fiending energy. Like at the end of the night, there's always like you got to hit it people are always leaving every 10 minutes, and like it's just so short lived that the whole night becomes distracted by running off to the bathroom, do some more, come back, and at the end of the night when it runs out. People are coming, hey, Stefan. I'm like, oh, somebody's come to catch up with me. Hey, how you been? Like, you think it's like this, we're having a moment. It's like, oh, do you have any Coke? Oh, no. Or like, oh, do you have $20? The Coke guy's coming. It almost feels like it's kind of a buzzkill. Like it's this constant, endless cycle of next hit. Whereas with mushrooms or acid, you do it once. The acid, you're good for 10, 12 hours. Mushrooms, 4 or 5 hours. Molly, 3, 4, 5 hours, depending. Yeah. And so you're not distracted by the it's almost like short YouTube videos, 12 seconds. You got to switch to the next one every 12 seconds.
Yeah, it's like the TikTok of drugs.
Yeah, exactly. It's the TikTok of drugs, exactly.
It is, and you're totally right using the word fiending, because it really is that. People, you get to a point where everything becomes about when are we doing more cocaine. It's not. Yeah. I had a long chat on the podcast with a guy who he was a pretty bad addict, and he's completely changed his life, and he's got this whole protocol about changing your mindset around it. And it was he said the exact same things. You get to this point where you think you're connecting and you think you're socializing, but it's not that at all. It doesn't actually matter. No, it doesn't matter who you're with. It's about the drugs. It's about doing the cocaine. The moments in between that are few and far between when you're doing it. And whereas like the last thing you want to do after you've come down from a mushroom journey, or I would say probably an acid journey, is, should we go again? Like for me, I've always been like, no fucking way. I need to, that was.
Yeah. You want to integrate. And you tend to integrate some of the things you've experienced. I hear a lot of times where people like they have this insight and they actually do something about it, right? So the trails that come after are productive and usually implementable, whereas with coke it's probably not the case. It's just not as healthy for you. It's quite unhealthy. Right? Whereas acid, you're doing like a little thing, or mushrooms, like there's no. It's actually, health-wise, it doesn't take as the same toll on your body.
Well, this is one of the things that I've always said about this stuff is you pay your dues up front with mushrooms, and the come up is challenging. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas
everything else is a bill. At the end, it's like, oh, you got your credit card bill. You're like, how much did I spend last
night? I can't afford that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you know the story about the guy who invented acid?
Yeah. What's his name? I'm blanking on it, but he was biking home. He did the equivalent of like 150 hits of acid or something accidentally.
Because he didn't even know that he was making that, right? Was he trying to make acid?
He was trying to make something, something to that effect. And I think he, didn't realize, he had been trying many times, and this is one of his other failed attempts, or so he thought. He's like, oh, okay, it's not working. I'm going to go home for the day. And then halfway the bike ride home, halfway through the ride home, he just, kind of went off the rails.
Yeah, and he'd had exactly like you said, like 150 times the normal dose, something ridiculous. So he's absolutely blasted. And then I think as the story goes, he was like, wow, that he survived that. And I don't know what he did, just went home and disappeared into his bed for all of eternity and then came back to life. But as the story goes, he apparently then went, okay, well, I need to figure this out. So he did like a fraction of the dose, which was still
probably still 10, 15 times. Exactly. And then eventually got to like, just that one drop.
It's got to be tiny micrograms. So this poor bastard was just fucking flying time and time again. Insane amounts of acid. And you hear there's a story about some guy. I think it was some cops that went to they got a warrant to go into someone's house, and the guy had been cooking acid in there, and the cops didn't know, and the cop breathed in all this stuff and was just it really messed him up. It's actually not. It's funny in a story, but in reality, he it fucked him up for a while because this cop had ingested so much acid just by being in the room or touching. I don't know what happened, but it's I guess because you can cook it and it's so powerful. Like you hear about the Grateful Dead would do these things where the Deadheads would go to these concerts and everyone would just be like, they'd just be handing drinks around and just popping it in everyone's drinks, and everyone was just absolutely flying. Yeah, it's
I mean, that would have been a fun era to explore.
What a time!
But, they also didn't have the same. I don't want to say the same reverence for it, because I think the '60s was like that failed hippie movement, or that they didn't have the same guidance, or they didn't have the infrastructure that we're seeing now in a more supportive way. You're seeing a lot of treatment centers using it responsibly under guidance and things like that, which I think was what was lacking perhaps in the '60s. And so it had a bad rap, and then it got, criminalized and all that stuff. And then everything kind of fell apart from there. But now, round two, we're coming back.
It's coming back, man. With research.
Data. Yeah, exactly.
Which is really fascinating. Yeah, it's really incredible, and I'm intrigued to see how it's going to play out. I think it's going to be interesting because it's something that when it's done in like a therapeutic setting, that can actually stop people having to take any other medications.
Yeah,
and you don't have to keep taking the psychedelics either, which means there's a lot of profits to be lost.
Yeah.
So that's
and that's always the fight, right, against big pharma.
Yeah.
Is like, creating or getting people off the dependency of some of these prescription meds, right?
Yeah.
Much like kratom versus opioids. It's like, it's a natural version of it. Not as controlled. You don't need a prescription. You don't need to go through the big pharma channels.
Yeah.
You can get it from, any smoke shop or online or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to see where all this is going. I think we're on the precipice of massive change.
Definitely. I mean, even with weed in Los Angeles and the States and in California, and I think I saw a documentary about how the legalization of weed was nowhere near as simple for growers as people had thought it was. They thought that it was going to be great. Now it's legal. Now we can freely grow and we can freely sell and all this kind of stuff. But there was all these hoops that they had to jump through if they were going to be regulated, and it became so challenging. And a lot of these growers realized that was kind of part of what they were really trying to do, was to over-regulate it so that it became so challenging, so that they
naturally filtered out. Yeah, I mean, I had that grow house with Mark Cole.
Yeah,
we got in late in the game.
What happened? But because that seemed like it was going really well. But what were the stumbling blocks for you?
We had a good product. It's almost like getting into crypto right at the top before the crash, right?
Yeah.
It's like when everyone wants to jump in, that's when it's already too late. Right?
You're done. Yeah,
you're done. Like you're catching the tail end of it, and then the people that have been in for years cash out at 20x. You made 2x or 3x. You're like, oh my god, I'm going to put more in, just like at the casino, right? Mm-hmm. So you think you're doing well because you did 2x or 3x, and people that were in a year or 5 years or 10 years prior are at like 50x or 1,000x or whatever that is. They're all cashing out, which take out the people at the top, right? So you have 5% of the people making 95% of the profits. So for similar to us, we saw that opportunity. We're like, oh, we jumped in. So we had our price per pound to produce was like $1,200, and at the time the price per pound that was selling for like $3,500. I think we sold the first 2-3 batches at that price, and then the market got flooded, and then it was selling for $800 a pound or $600 a pound. And so our cost to produce, we're losing half just on market value compared to what we're producing, right? And I don't, it was good weed, but people don't care enough to pay double the price, which would still be our break-even cost. So we just got in late, to be honest.
So you really had to be Walmart of weed in order to make any money.
Yeah, and good for them. Like the ones that actually push through all the regulation, to push through, the petitions or the whatever, like the whole process. I'm sure these guys must be like, oh, all these donkeys coming in last minute trying to cash out on this. We've been, since the beginning, we've been in on this, like pushing hard, and
and back when it was illegal, there were companies
they
who
were
doing
risking
it.
the thing exactly. So you're seeing that new flow now with mushrooms, whereas in hindsight we should have gotten straight into the mushrooms at the time, because that was like the next, that would be like Ethereum to Bitcoin, if you want to use that as an example, because mushroom is the next, I think, wave of what will likely be legalized next, and so people that are setting up now, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road will be in a position to kind of, cash out the way that the weed guys did.
Well, there you go. That's the plan.
That's the plan. Next.
We're not even on
crypto.
And we've got a great business idea. Yeah.
Exactly. Imagine if we did it. We're like, bro, here's what we do. Okay, hang on. Here's what we do.
Yeah, that's right. We'd actually be creating voice memo business plans in our phones and listening back.
It would be interrupted every 2 seconds. Hang on 1 sec. I can run to the
yeah. That's right.
A 1 hour podcast would be like 10 hours of all the interruptions.
Yeah.
So by the way, I'm realizing this is the first time we did this. That was like 7 years ago, right? When you just started. I think I was your second or third. I think you were number Jimmy
2,
Wong.
man.
Yeah, I think it was number 2. Jimmy Wong was first, or someone, I think.
Yeah, man. It was.
I forget.
Yeah, you were way back in the day, and I certainly didn't know what I was doing, but you kind of carried things quite well. I think I was even going to bring in. It's only It's not even midday here for me on the Gold Coast, but I was even going to bring in a little shot of tequila because we had a shot of tequila last time.
Did. Well, I remember I kept having a sip, and I'm realizing like by the end of it, I'm like I started to sound a little slurpy. So this time I was waiting. For me, it's like 6 o'clock. I could have a drink with you, but
yeah, I got a cup of tea, so
I'll do my kombucha. There you go.
Perfect.
The kombucha.
Yeah, perfect. So, dude, fire.
Yeah,
man.
What a welcome to 25. It's funny. It kind of reminded me of COVID. Everybody's like, New Year's, this is going to be the year, 25, thrive in 25. And like everyone's like ready for it's like a bitch slap. It's like the same thing with COVID where we're like, oh my God, in life, you never know. Yeah, it was crazy. And much like COVID.
I'm just intrigued to know what it was like when it started. Like, how did that come on for you on the ground living there?
Yeah. So that's what was interesting is it kind of reminded me of the COVID thing where I remember being at an open house and COVID was kind of like, people were start talking about it. And like, it was like that awkward moment of like, oh, hey, I'm Stefan. Do you shake hands? I'm like, I don't care. Like, whatever. Like, this thing, like people are overly paranoid, it's going to blow over. And then, a few days later, then you start realizing, oh, this is actually becoming a thing.
Because it happens. There are fires often.
Yeah, exactly. So we had fires not too long ago in Malibu, which, tends to happen, regularly, more contained and, usually a lot of brush fires, maybe a structure or two gets taken out, maybe not, whatever. And so this day, I think it was on a Tuesday, we were doing open houses and I came up and I saw like, smoke in the distance. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And somebody's like, oh, dude, did you hear about the, fires in Palisades? And I was going to go check out some open houses there. I didn't get a chance to make it out there. But you're like, oh yeah, that sucks. It's, Palisades. Well, that's unique because normally it's Malibu. It's like, it's coming close to Palisades. I'm like, oh, I'm sure they'll continue. You just think whatever.
So did you have some listings there?
I didn't have any current listings. I had some sales that, houses that I'd sold.
Oh yeah. So you know that area really well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I probably had about 35 colleagues and close friends and colleagues and clients that lost their house, like burnt to the ground.
Oh, wow. Like, wow.
Leveled. Yeah, that whole Alphabet Street. I mean, that's actually one of the places that, I was, and maybe still will now in the future, because by the time I can afford there, it'll probably be a few years. But that was always a place I had my eye on. Like, that'd be a place that I would like to live. It's great because it's neighborhood vibe. You're close to the beach. It's a nice area. Malibu is great too, but it's a bit far. And Santa Monica is nice too, but the Palisades was just a great little spot. It's like this little pocket. And once it started rolling through there, we're like, holy shit. And so, it was like, what? The Alphabet Streets? We call them the Alphabet Streets. They're getting burnt. What? And then everything was decimated. Like it's crazy. And Malibu, like all along the PCH, it's like simultaneously. It was definitely the most shocking. You don't think it's going to happen to you. And that's not that it happened to me, but a lot of people close to me, you don't think it'll get to that point because you always, at some point they'll figure it out. They'll put it out. They're not going to let this happen. But it's took everyone by surprise.
And just exactly that feeling of, someone will take care of this, right? Like it'll be taken. And it's interesting how insulated we've become. But then every now and again, we get these reminders where, no, bitch, this is the fucking Wild West out here, man. If Mother Nature wants to, she will just flick us off. Bye-bye. Like little things like that. Like you hear about these tornadoes and these crazy flash floods or tsunamis or wildfires. And there's, I mean, we could get into the ins and outs of how better prepared California could have been, should have been, but it's still, there's a point where it doesn't matter how much we prepare for these natural disasters. We are, if push comes to shove, we are fucked.
Yeah, if the right things happen, if the right three trifecta comes together, that there's no, no matter how, there's no saving it. Yeah, I mean, because the winds were insane. My awning here was like blowing off the thing. It actually blew off the hinge. I had to like strap it down.
Yeah, wow.
Craziest wind. So you mix that with fire, with proximity to each other, like it's good
and
luck,
it doesn't really, like I remember from living there, it'll rain like nonstop for a month every 4 years, but then it just rains so infrequently. in general.
Well, that's the issue too, because when the rains come, everything's fertile and all the grass and all the shrubs, they grow up high. And if they don't, normally they clear it, as you should. Brush clearance is part of the process. Like, if you're selling a house and you're closing on a house, if the brush clearance isn't done, you can't close on the house because of that, right? And so you have a lot, but even brush clearance, you chop down the stuff, it's still kind of sitting there, so everything's grown in from the fires. I mean, from the rains. And then fire season comes, it's dry, it's like kindling. It's like a matchbox.
It's even worse than a desert because there's no fuel in a desert. It's
desert, exactly. There's just sand. It's fine. You a couple Joshua trees, you'll be fine, right? Whereas here, it's like,
oh man.
And then it's really hard. So what also exacerbated is the high winds. They weren't able to do the flyovers with the, helicopters and planes dropping all that fire retardant stuff because the winds were too strong. And so you're just fighting it from the ground, which is limited by, proximity to some of these big things. And then, I was talking to a lot of the fire guys when I was giving up the Starlings, and they're like, you don't realize like how crazy it is out there. Like, when you see a little campfire, sometimes a little thing pops, like a little flame, pops out of the fire. Because you'll see blocks of like 2x4s like this, just whoo, you hear them like like just flying like left and right, like knocking you out sometimes. And so there's a limitation to, how far they can go, how close they can get, because you just have these massive pieces of wood just exploding under the immense heat. And then the wind blowing all that stuff over. It's crazy.
Oh man, it was just so volatile. All those conditions came together, plus a clear lack of preparation for it. It's just like
man. Perfect storm.
So was it really fast? Because we heard about it when it was obviously here in Australia. You hear about it in international news when it's really bad. But one thing that I am intrigued about was for you living there. Did you get much warning? Like how severe was the warning when it started? And do you think that the media representation of it was true to what it was really like when you were there on the ground?
Yeah, I don't know the media representation of it because I don't watch the news. I just noticed. Because I figured I'll find out about it eventually.
I actually put it on for the first time in years. I was like, I better watch the fucking news actually because
for things like that. I mean, of course, like I didn't need to watch it because I was in it. But I'm sure if I saw something like that, I don't even know where I would get it because I don't have cable. But on Instagram, I guess, whatever. But when you start having all the people call you, like I'm starting to get tech. Hey, Steph, you okay from the fire, Steph? I'm like, oh, I guess it's bigger than we realize. Because for us, at the beginning, like I said, day one is like, oh, there's fires. Well, day two is starting to get like, oh shit, this is becoming a thing. Not realizing the extent of it until people start. So I'm assuming that the news jumped on it early and really pumped it out.
Guess they did.
A lot of friends I haven't talked to in a while, like checking up. It's like when I was at Burning Man with the rains. Everyone's like checking. Oh my God, like I don't have signal out there, but every once in a while I would drive, I guess, through a hotspot and I have like 300-400 texts, ding, 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 ding. Like, oh, what's going on? What happened? I'm like, oh, they're talking about the rain.
Me.
Like, it's fine. It's not
it's raining.
But yeah, exactly. So that was,
I remember that too, because
I
was like, Steph's dead for sure. Steph's dead. He's definitely dead. Like I know he's there, and I know he's underwater. Like if you listen to
stuck in the mud, just suffocating to death. Yeah. So that was way blown out of proportion. But this, really? I mean, I would imagine to whatever extent they covered it, that this is actually serious because it was. I remember thinking like another one. Like it just kept spreading. So Palisades was burning up. Then, then it kind of like died off a little bit. Then it moved to Malibu and Palisades. And then I'm at the office and because I was on the motorcycle a lot because I was able, I kind of snuck in, because everything was blocked. You couldn't go to the things. And I went with a buddy of mine because he wanted to see if he can get into his safe at his house was leveled. And I'm like, all right, cool. So we kind of went around this guard. We just kind of snuck around. We took the motorcycle. We went straight to his house. That had already been burned. So there's not much, a little bit of an active fire at his house, which is why we didn't go into the safe because
his whole house is gone.
Yeah, I'll send you pictures. Decimated. So we snuck in there, and so I was on my bike a lot. I get back to the office, and then Maritza was like, hey, "Steph, I think the Hollywood Hills are on fire." I'm like, "What?" Runyon Canyon, which as you know is close to me. So I'm like, "Fuck!" I look outside, you see this huge light coming from. I'm like, "Fuck!" So I'm like, I jumped on my bike, shot straight home because I wanted to get the cars out and all that stuff. And total chaos, mayhem, which confirmed my belief that I said I would always keep a motorcycle no matter what because it's just easy getaway. I was able to go around things, sidewalks, cutting through stuff, burning lights, because cops, what are they going to do? They have somewhere else to be.
So it was like anarchy for a little while there.
As you get closer to it, because they start blocking off streets because you need the roads to be open for fire trucks to go through and put out the fires. And then now those people are jammed. There's traffic here. Like, it's just chaos, right? People.
Wow.
And so I came home, got the cars out, hosed down my patio, because if they were traveling as fast as it was the Palisades, luckily the winds were not as strong or that strong that night. So it ended up being fine, but we did have an official evacuation. And they put it out pretty quick because we have Lake Hollywood here, which is pretty close. So the trucks, and they were able to, the winds were not strong, so they were able to do the drops from the airplanes and helicopters. Mm-hmm. So they just kept going back and forth. And I think because it was in the hills, kind of Runyon, as you know, it's just more like brush. I think it put out pretty easy. They dropped, they put it out, they contained it pretty quick. I think when houses are burning, the 2x4s, the woods, all that wood, that's a heavier. It's just like putting out fire, so the campfire, the thick, oak logs that are burning for a while. That's a lot harder to put out than just, twigs and leaves. So they
There's
contain
probably
that
a bunch of like
quick.
plastics and things in there that just burn for ages.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Even now, the levels, the toxicity levels are very high because a lot of old homes with asbestos, all the Tesla batteries, right? It's an area where, it's very, green and, the mindset. So there's a lot of Teslas, a lot of electric cars. And the lithium ion from the batteries are all just a lot of toxicity. So even now, I have a lot of friends and clients that are moving from the area, even though the fires are gone, just to get away from the air quality.
I was going to say, what's it like? Yeah. Is it still pretty bad?
It's, if you go close to it. So the day we snuck in with my buddy, I didn't really have a mask. I had my little, Burning Man scarf or whatever. And I'm like, it's fine. It's like campfire. Who cares? Not realizing, the toxicity of all the other stuff that burns in it. But the next day, or for the next 2 days, I had like a tightness in my chest. Like when I was breathing in, I'm like, oh shit, this is real. It's a real thing. So even now, like in those areas close to it, ideally, it's not ideal. Drinking water is like super toxic. So even the filtered, if like people are saying, oh, the water's safe, but if you actually buy, I had some friends that bought like a little test kit that they stick it in and you see like red, levels. So now I usually don't care so much about tap water. I'll drink it, but now I'm jumping on the bottled water for now.
Yeah.
So there's still, I'm sure, the micro whatever elements that are toxic, that's probably best to stay away from if you can.
Yeah.
So I'm here. I'm a little bit further out, and the wind tends to blow west. So it's fine.
Dude, it was lucky it didn't come down to where you are, because I saw that video, you hosing your patio and everything, and just like prepping for it to come down. It could have come down the hill, man. That video you put up was like, oh, it's just there.
Yeah, on the other side. Yeah. So had the winds blown, I'm sure this would have burnt up. So I actually filmed my place, like, hey, this might be the last time. Everyone signs my wall. I filmed that. I'm like, A, for the insurance company to show my art and all that stuff and all the things I have. And then B, just like this might be the, souvenir of like, oh, remember that place I once had? So I did a little film. It was cool. I mean, cool. It was interesting as an experience to be like, other than like, I guess the equity I would lose here, because I don't think I'm very well insured. It's something I never really think about. But now I need to reassess that. But that would have sucked. But, at the same time, if we're all alive and all this stuff, just start over.
It's that Fight Club kind of mentality, where
it's like Burning Man, right? Everything is transient. Just burn it, let go. So I think naturally throughout my life, I've always had that element of being okay with letting things go. I don't think it would have been.
Yeah, well, when you take enough psychedelics that actually kill your entire being, and then you come out of it enough times, I'm sure you can come to terms with losing a shelf and a couple of doors and a bed.
And all like sentimental cards and all the home picture, like all that stuff usually now is in the cloud. I did grab, obviously my passport, things like that, a box of like old memory things, whatever. But if that stuff burns, like, when are you ever going to watch that? Like, we have hundreds of, hours of home videos. When's the last time you actually sat down and watched home videos? I remember
that's a great
when my mom was dying. When my mom was dying, like, we were like, hey, you want to look at some, like, she didn't want to look at that because it reminded her of a time that was better. Like, it's almost sad to see what you're leaving. Like, you don't even want to. So, we hold on to all these things for what? It's like, sometimes you find something, go, oh my God, I haven't seen this in forever. And you have a moment for like 10 minutes of like, oh, this was that thing where, oh my God, remember that? And then you put it down and you're on to the next thing. Yeah. So you got to store, hoard all that stuff for a few micro moments. If you don't run into it and find it and have that memory of like, oh my God, I forgot about this, you're not going to know that you didn't have that moment because you're not going to remember it if you don't see it. So at some point, there's something cathartic about starting fresh. It's different with friends, with kids that have, they're like, I get that. I don't want to sound insensitive to it, obviously. But I also think that, at the same time, my buddy said it well. It's like, in a way, this is a reminder to let go of things that don't really matter so we can focus on things that do. Right? Yep. We're so caught up in the stuff we have and to like the things we want, blah, blah, at the detriment of the relationships that we're, distracted from by having all this stuff. Yeah. And so it was interesting. It's like how people handle things will determine, their character and how they move forward. But I think a lot of people here have been really, really good. And a lot of the people that have lost things have been surprisingly, approaching it with a surprising mindset of just like, hey, let go, focus on, the rebirth and all that stuff. And they've been dealing with it quite well. And to see the community come together, helping out, everyone doing what they can. They say LA is like, this, vapid, shallow place where nobody cares. It's all about them. So to kind of see the soul of LA come together, for me, it's really cool, really beautiful.
That's really cool. Well, that is something that, and I've said this to you in the text message, that I think that town needs, and it's a bummer that it takes a disaster for that to happen, but it's great that it has happened, and that's amazing. It's almost hard to believe, because that was one of the big driving factors for us to get out, was because we're just like, man, there's just, aside from our friends, there's just no love in this city. People just don't care about each other. They're just so people have really come together.
Yeah, big time.
Have you got a full house of people, full house of very wealthy people with no home?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I offered my room up when when it was going on, but I think there was a lot of people have money in that neighborhood. There was also Pasadena. There's also other areas. It wasn't just the wealthy, but those that did have, they had the means to stay at a hotel, and like even the hotel chains, a lot of them were offering. Airbnb was offering a free week. 50,000 Mitad was offering half off. A lot of hotels in the valley were offering, rooms at discounts, dogs allowed, just everyone kind of did their part. But
it is amazing, isn't it, how the humanity eventually comes out, even in a place like LA. It can still come out if things are bad enough. People realize, oh fuck, we actually really do need each other. It is kind of the one thing that is important. Yeah.
Well, and like you said, it's too bad something like this has to happen, but isn't it always the case where, to bring people together, something bad has to happen, or something challenging, or something, in the old days, that's what, that's how community was formed, by your need for community to survive, right? We didn't have the same, protection from elements or whatever that we had to kind of like tigers, attacking you or whatever that is. It would have to be somebody in the tribe that keeps an eye out on shift or whatever that is, right? There was a need, more of a need for community to kind of not only survive but thrive.
What do they say that's one of the conspiracy theories around all this current talk about aliens, is that is one of the ways for the new world order and the world government to take hold, because if we have a threat that is external from our world, then the whole world will come together. So that's the only way to do it.
It's like, it's that saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yes.
Right. If there's a bigger enemy to fight, if you and I have a squabble or whatever, and there's someone else that we both have a bigger issue with, let's say a little peace treaty for now. Let's get rid of this problem and then go back to fighting ech other.
All the hardcore racists can put that on hold because these guys are green. It's the green guys we need to worry about.
All the extra woke stuff. Put that on hold for now. We got real problems to solve for a minute.
That's right. Well, now that'll be
we'll get back to the petty stuff after.
The pitchforks with the rainbow hair folk fighting the green guys together.
Exactly.
That'll be wow, man. So what's the state of things now with fires wise?
Yeah, so the fires, obviously are contained now. Now it's more like the challenge on the rebuilding phase, right?
Yeah.
So
it's all kind of calm, but it's just shit, right?
Yeah. Well, then there was the whole 10,000 people without homes needing houses and leases, and so then you had the dark side of these disasters. Like we see the moments where everybody comes together, but there's always the moment where people take advantage, right? And so there was, these price gouging, right? So houses that were listed for whatever, $10,000 a month that were sitting on the market for 6 months, you'll see that after the fires, they got taken out and they brought back on for like $15,000 or $20,000 a month, which obviously now there's a penal code, 396, that doesn't allow that. It's actually criminal. It's a criminal code. So people that did that were subject to fines and jail. So that got put down real quick. But you would see you would see the lack of humanity in this. Like, oh, I can rent my house for double the price now because you're desperate and you need it. Just like, during COVID with the people that would buy the hand sanitizer for like $1 a pop and then sell them for like $5 or toilet paper, all that stuff. There's always going to be a percentage of the population that tries to like capitalize on
leech off the desperation. Yeah, that's dark.
Yeah. So we had that for a few weeks. A lot of people now are already in places. So now it's about the rebuilding phase, right? And so because Palisades is within the Coastal Commission, for permits, for those that don't know LA, all along the coast, there's permitting process for a house, to get approved by the city, and then there's another process that needs to get approved by the Coastal Commission, which is usually very long and tedious. And so like there's they're working on expediting some of the processes of getting permits. They're signing some addendums to like some of the permitting process that's more lenient on what you could build now. And so normally, if you were to buy a house and you tear it down and you want to build something new, you would be subject to current codes. They're allowing people to go by the codes of the house, of their house in the year that it was built for the most part. That makes it a little easier to get approval. And so there's, but to what degree, all that stuff's being worked out now. Just like you cannot. It's going to be clunky though, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you're seeing some people talk about like neighbors getting together and saying like, hey, this 5 or 10 rows of houses on the same block, let's go with the same contractor. Let's all try and agree with one builder so that, if you're pouring concrete, you can pour 10 concrete foundations instead of one, minimizing costs, expediting the process. And then a lot of people that didn't have like great insurance, to rebuild their 3,000 square foot house, at $1,000 a foot, is $3 million. A lot of people bought these houses, 30 years ago for $300,000. Sure, their house is worth $3 million, but they don't have that kind of money. If they're retired or whatever. How are you going to rebuild? If your insurance only covers $1 million of it.
Yeah, that's a problem because insurance is not just going to go, here you go. Like they can't. Yeah. This is the thing that insurance companies don't like paying out at the best of times.
Yeah, exactly.
When everyone's trying to get their money, like the reality would be like, we don't fucking have it. It's like the banks. Basically, if everyone tries to take your money at the bank, the bank's like, we don't have that, right? Yeah. We've been lying. We don't actually have it. We gave it out.
Here's a piece of paper. Yeah.
Yeah. So insurance isn't just going to cough it up.
Correct. Yeah. So that's, and a lot of people didn't have the proper insurance, right? Like most people just get the minimal insurance to get the loan to close on the house because you don't actually think that this will happen. So there's a bit of that going on. There's the good thing is they're allowing I got to say that there are some good. They are handling certain things well. So if you had a $3 million house that you paid $500,000 for 20 years ago, your tax basis is on $500,000, right? Because you bought it. And it usually gets assessed every year for the most part, but 3% at most or whatever. And so now if you have to go buy a replacement house for $3 million and you're on a fixed income because you're retired, those taxes are going to be 5 times, 10 times the price. They're allowing you to keep the same tax on the new purchase. So if let's say you said, I'm moving out of LA, I'm going to go to Australia, and you bought a $2 million, well, Australia's a different country, so it wouldn't work. But if you're moving, to San Diego or to Ohio somewhere, and you bought a $2 million house, they'll allow you to keep the tax you were paying on the initial house twice. So you can, let's say you move there, you don't like it, you want to move again, you can carry that tax shelter over twice, which is nice. It allows people to kind of like, reacclimate and figure things out for themselves. So, they're all that is kind of in flux. They're talking about suspending the ULA tax, which is a 5% tax that was implemented about a year ago. They were looking to suspend that for properties affected by the fires in case you did want to sell your property. And it was like, $10 million bucks. So you don't have to pay the taxes on that, even though it would just be the land value now. But there was some big house, dude. There was that one $68 million house that burnt up, the one that crypto guy bought. I forget the street. But there was a lot. There was some big houses that went down. I mean,
wow,
crazy.
Isn't it? It is an interesting place of all places to be hit the worst, isn't it? That it's these mansions, these multi-million-dollar homes that is just like these art pieces of art in these, like the homes themselves are a one-off architectural masterpieces in there,
and that's just the homes. Then there's the artwork. Then there's like the Rolexes and the Porsches. Like
$68 million house with nothing in it.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck, like man. That's oftentimes that's the cheapest part of their assets, right?
Yeah,
is a house. It's like it's crazy.
It is crazy. It's a really interesting thing, and it happened. Do you know how many people lost their homes? Like how many homes burned down?
I think the last count was like 10,000 because you had the Palisades. You had Altadena and Pasadena, which was also, gravely affected. You had nothing here in the Sunset Fires. You had on the valley side coming down to west Hidden Hills. So it hit a lot of spots. And what was crazy about it, going back to like the night where like I had to run home, for the Sunset Fires. So I had some buddies, they saw the news. They're like, "Hey, Steph, are you cool? You good? You need help?" I'm like, I'm in the middle of evacuating. I'll call you later, blah, blah, blah. And like an hour later, I hear that Studio City is getting, lit up. And so I texted the buddy who texted me 2 hours earlier, like, "Hey, you cool?" I'm like, looks like it's your turn now. Are you cool? You're like, so it just kept, this one was arson
all over the place.
Well, this one was arson, I believe. I think it hasn't come out yet, but it was arson investigation there because at that point, you had a bunch of disgruntled, homeless people or bitter people or fuck these guys, blah, blah, and just, lighting up fires, on the tab of like, oh, wind blew over, like blame the winds. So you saw a lot of arson,
But you reckon there was a bit?
Yeah, there was a lot because I talked to, again, when I was giving all the Starlinks out to the cops and the first responders, I would talk to a lot of these guys. And so I was getting a lot of the inside scoop of what was really going on there. And like, I was in one of the fire trucks and I would hear then there was all the looting, of course. And so now like when people were being evacuated, the houses aren't burning, but in case it burns, you evacuate. Then all the looting started, right? People started robbing. So I was in one of the fire trucks and I would hear relentless calls, looting, burglary here, like holy shit! Again, the jackasses that take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
And so I had one of my buddies stayed at home. He had his guns all ready, and people came to his door like, "Oh, is that your bike?" Like some random stupid question they're asking. Like, what are you talking about? You're asking me about my bike outside? Like, no, it's not my bike. And then the cops came later and saying that there was a bunch of people going around. What they do is they knock on the door. If somebody answers it, they just make up some bullshit reason why they're there. And if not, they go around back and they rob you. And so that was a huge thing too, the looting thing. So a lot of people were taking advantage of that. And so people were starting fires to kind of create an evacuation somewhere so they can go and loot. It was like, and it was all organized. Like these guys were like, you would see like, it came out later, you would see like the organization around like, hey, light here, do this, you come around here, order that, you load this. And it was crazy. So that's when the National Guards came in. And they just shut everything down. So like I said, the second day I was able to sneak into the fires and all that stuff. 2 days later, National Guards were there. Even if you had your passport, your address, even if you had a press pass, even if you had from the insurance company, I had some friends that worked for the insurance company. They go and they assess the damage or whatever. They weren't letting anyone in because people were making fake passes to get through. They know all the houses are empty. They go rob everything. It's just, it was chaos.
Wow.
I never felt, I mean, I've been to Cambodia. I've been all over these, crazy third world countries where, you see dead cows on the side of the road and people with, in Cambodia, kids with, half blown off limbs and stuff like that. This felt surreal to be in like the Palisades and look literally like a war zone, like trees falling on melted car. Like it was crazy. It was, like Chernobyl.
Just like the smoke just sitting around everywhere. You got the National Guard there. You got burning cars and stuff, man. It's like, a proper war zone in the Pacific Palisades, man.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
Wow. What an odd experience. Hey.
Yeah. It was, I really, I don't know how this will come off. I really enjoyed the adventure of it, because everyone was safe and all that stuff. But there was something like, when are you ever gonna experience something like this again?
It's much easier to see the bright side of it when your house doesn't burn down.
Exactly.
I get it. My house.
Yeah. I'm like, and so if I'm fine, let me go and see if I can help out. Doing all that stuff. So it gives you something to do, and something to see the community come together. And it was nice to kind of see that aspect of it, right?
I totally get it. There's something thrilling about that, because it breaks all the mental junk that we carry around, like this little silly stuff that genuinely doesn't matter, and something that actually matters, like a life and death thing. There's something beautiful about it. Like when we lived in Sydney, we had this insane rainfall this one time, and the drains got clogged, and the whole street just started to flood, and it came all the way up our street and started to kind of almost flood in, like, into our garage and into where we lived. And it was, and everything stopped because everyone was like, we need to deal with this. And so I went out there, and I'm, in the rain, and I'm sloshing around, and there was a woman whose car was the water. She was right in the low spot, and the water was right up to her driver's window. Oh, it was just about at the driver's window, and she was freaking out. So she gave me a key, so I fucking got in this woman's car and drove it, and it actually drove. Maybe the water wasn't that high; it must be blowing it out. It wouldn't have, but it was, it was high. It was like I was wet in this car, and I managed to drive it and put it somewhere else, and I'm wandering around, and I go back inside, and Laurel's like,
"What's next? Now what?" You feel like Superman.
But I couldn't help myself. I was like, I just felt called to go. This is a real thing that's happening. So I completely understand that call to action.
That rush, it's a bit of a rush, right? It's like
it's a real thing.
You're trying to be of use. Otherwise, you could sit around and watch the news and just spin out and get depressed, or just be part of the action. I always want to be part of the action. Like, even when we used to go to church as a kid, I was an altar boy, because I'm like, if I'm going to be stuck here, I might as well get involved and have
do something.
Kind of remind me of Burning Man, that chaos. Like you were saying, nothing else really matters. Nobody's like worrying about how many likes you got on your whatever. Like, none of that matters. What's the next task? What now? What needs to be done? Who needs what? And speaking of presence, I guess it's like being on cocaine. Speaking of presence, right? It just really centers you. And this all happened during my dry January month, right? So I was like,
a bit of action.
This would have been much better on acid, but I stuck with it. A lot of people broke their dry January. Like, well, so fire. I'm like, it was tempting, but I'm like, there's always going to be something in life that you can justify breaking your commitments. So I'm like, I'll stick with it. And it was cool to feel like I had that kind of a similar rush, a similar high naturally from just the experiential aspect of life versus, some substance. So it's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Because that's a real rush, isn't it? That's like,
The natural rush. Yeah.
And it doesn't just kind of fade, especially with what you were doing, because it's going to be a while until things are normal again.
Yeah.
Back where you are. Tell me, how do you feel about LA now after that? And just in general, because I feel like it's easy for me to comment because I've left, and so it's very easy for me to just look at all the bad things that have happened since I left and that were happening, and just go, oh, it's all turned to shit. But you're there, you're still there. Something very bad has just happened. But how do you feel about it being there?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was thinking about that yesterday, because I was riding my motorcycle during the day. And then I went snowboarding at night, and I was thinking to myself, like, how cool is that? How many places can you do that, right? I have a beautiful day on my motorcycle.
Where did you go snowboarding?
Mountain High. It's not the greatest skiing, but it's only an hour and 20 minutes away. It's like a nice little home gym. If you don't have time to go to the gym, just do some push-ups at home. It's a nice little warm-up, and then I'll go to Mammoth, when I have a bit more time. So it's not the greatest, but it's still felt cool to be able to ride my motorcycle in the day.
Yeah.
Or play beach volleyball and then go for a night skiing session or something like that. And so for me, I just look, it's like the cost of paradise, or, look, and we still have the potential for massive earthquakes. There's still a lot of other things, So I'm not really deterred by the natural disasters here, because that's something you can't really control. You're always going to have some kind of element of that wherever you are. Like Montreal, it's the snowstorms, or we had the massive ice storms in '98, which probably nobody heard about because it's Canada. More specifically Montreal,
that's normal though, right? It's like all of Canada.
But it's funny because it was 2 days. Somebody sent me the memory of it, which was 2 days or the day before the fire started here, almost to the day, 28 years ago. If you actually Google ice storm Montreal '98, you'll see it was insane, because it was basically like freezing rain for like a week straight. So like you would see a branch or like a cable, like electric cable, like this small, and the ice around it was like this. So trees were falling, power cables were falling. Imagine seeing a whole city like Montreal or like LA or New York, all blacked out, just like you see in the movies. It was like one of these surreal moments. The fires were similar to that in a different way that I had experienced 28 years ago in Montreal with the ice storm, which was just insane. It took like months to bring power back, because you can't just plug it back in. You got to put the new cables. You couldn't do that until the rain stopped. Trees were falling, blocking streets. It was total chaos. Similar things, looting and all that stuff. So there's always going to be something like that. I think for me, more the turnoff of LA are more around overly regulated things, like in the real estate market, right? We had the wildlife ordinance, we had the ULA tax, we had the commission now has been changed with paying the buyer side commission. We had like all these other things that just added to an already challenging real estate market that has shifted since COVID. It's just like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 combo punch. It's like, dude, how much more can we take before you get burnt out in this industry?
So you're more worried about getting burnt out in the industry than getting literally burnt out in your home.
Yeah, because I can always run. Like if the fire's coming. So when I left everything, my girlfriend was pissed because she lives in Beverly Hills. I was going to go to her place, so I took the cars out and I dropped one off like at her Airbnb, and I'm like, I kind of want to see I want to go back into it and see, like, so I'm like, I texted her, I'm like, hey, I need to be a little bit later. I'm going to walk. I walked back to my house. She was all pissed. What the fuck? The fires are coming. I'm like it's not like it's not like a bomb. It's not like an earthquake. It's like if I see it coming over the hills, I'll just jump on my motorcycle and take off. Like, what's worst case? I could just run. It's not that big a deal. I want to be fun. So it's like I can't imagine.
When you say that with a Canadian accent, it kind of checks out. But if you said that with a redneck accent, people would be laughing their asses off.
Yeah, right. I should do like a Theo Von accent.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not so turned off by that. In LA, it's more the other stuff, more the political arena. Sure. But again, to me, it's still worth all the joys I have here. Because for me, it just checks a lot of my boxes. Beach volleyball. I'm very active. I like to hike in the mountains. I like to snowboard. I like to ride motorcycles. I like to go out to cool fun events. I like to So I like the action. Do I see myself living elsewhere? Yes, but I'll always keep a place here. It's the way I see it. I don't think I would ever be out of it 100%. I think it'll always be a place that I keep a footprint in. Yeah. To me, it's and I think I'm excited to see how we come back and how we rebuild. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. That kind of happened with Christchurch, where Laurel's from in New Zealand, when they had some shocking earthquakes. I think it was like 15 years ago now. But they had some really New Zealand. What's that?
They have earthquakes in New Zealand, I guess.
Yeah, man, New Zealand's pretty bad from in certain spots. I think a whole chunk of New Zealand in general is made, like, that's why it's so mountainous.
Yeah, mountainy.
Because the plates are just pushing it up, and so it's pretty notorious in certain areas for earthquakes in New Zealand. Yeah, so there were bad ones in Christchurch, and the city. The irony being that the churches were the first things that fell down because they were such old buildings, but all the churches in Christchurch just got leveled. Like loads of people's homes fell apart. Laurel had an investment place that just got cooked, and now it's a completely different city. There are still some places, we were there not long ago. There are still some places that have just never rebuilt, and it's just still, it's
like
still
like just decrepit homes, like broken up.
Just like half a business building that is still just fallen off, and they haven't ever done it. Maybe, I mean, again, insurance would have been an absolute nightmare trying to get a payout for that. But there's all these new things. There's these whole chunks of the CBD and these little cool, new funky little areas to go out and have dinner and have drinks and little cultural hubs that have popped up. Like there was a whole container mall that they had for a while. So it was like this all out of shipping containers that they turned into all these different little businesses and markets, and it was really cool. And how it's grown out of that chaos has been really beautiful.
It clears the way for something new, right? Otherwise, you never force. Nobody's going to go out of their way to, unless you want to tear something down and rebuild. But half the times you're like, it's fine for now, But if something is forcefully destroyed, then and you want to be there. You're
Might as well fix those things that I couldn't be bothered fixing before.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a relationship, right? Like you never blah blah. Then something happens and a relationship ends, and all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself, "Fuck, I got to get my shit together." Because this is not sustainable.
Maybe I was a bit shit. How do I be less shit so I can get?
Yeah. Maybe I should read a book on self-help and see what I could do better.
Maybe I should read a book.
Similar, right?
Yeah. How long have you been in real estate now?
18 years, 19 years, I guess.
Wow, okay.
I can never remember. Is it 2007 or 8? It was right before the crash. I got my license like 2 months before the crash of 08. So it must be 08. So 17 years.
Wow, man.
No, 07. I think I got licensed in 07. Something like that. Yeah.
It's a long time. A long time.
A while, yeah.
So you know how to do it. You've got the hang of it. Like you, some of your listings are these incredible homes. I remember when I was there, and how long was that? Like 6 years ago now. You took me to a few of them, and there were just these like amazing places in the hills, looking over all of LA.
I'm trying to think. Did you ever see the Dino House at that 20-30 million? Well, I think we sold it for 26.
Yeah. $26 million?
Yeah, it's 26 too. Yeah.
The one with that you guys had the massive like dinosaur sculpture thing in the front.
Correct. Yeah.
Fuck.
26
and there were all those. There were all the cars that you got staged in that.
Correct. Yeah, we did an opening, the revealing for the McLaren Eva.
That's right.
We did a partnership, the house and the car revealing and all that stuff. So, I wasn't sure when that was, if you were still here, but I guess you're still here. Yeah. So those are great houses. One of the beauties of doing real estate in LA is you have a chance to see or represent or sell some of these places, because where else would you do that?
You must come across some pretty interesting characters doing this, like you would in general, being, even if you're just a standard real estate agent, but when you have these kind of places that you're facilitating someone buying, this isn't a normal someone that's dropping $26 million on a home.
Yeah.
So you must come across some pretty interesting folks, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people saw that house. Actually, I'm not big into basketball stuff, but not LeBron, the other guy that plays with him. But we've had a bunch of celebrities through that house, a bunch of inspiring business guy. I've showed Elon houses over the years. So that's one of the other things I love about real estate is that it puts you in the middle of life in every aspect, right? If you're a heart surgeon, you only see people that are, going in for heart surgery. And even that, it's like you're operating on them. You're not hanging out talking to them. Whereas here, everybody's buying a house. Everyone's in real estate, right? Whether you own or rent, like you're in a house, you're in real estate, technically speaking, whether you're, there for a year or you buy it for 10 years. So real estate is a part of everyone's life to a certain degree. And so at some point you got to meet every character from, a $3,000 lease to a $30 million sale. And that's obviously a very diverse group of people, especially in LA, because a lot of people are here. So it's, for me, one of the things that really drew me to it is the diversity in how your day can look, right? So you wake up, you meet this person, you show this house, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you're, having lunch, you're showing this person this house. Next thing you know, like, it's just so different, or varied, which bodes well for my adventurous character. So it's definitely
So, and this is something that I've always found really interesting about you, is that you so, it takes courage to do psychedelics, a lot of courage. Anyone who's done it can attest to that, and anyone who hasn't done it can attest to that, because there's a reason why they haven't done it. Doesn't take any courage to do coke.
Yeah.
But to do psychedelics, it takes a lot of introspection and courage, and you have to be comfortable with who you are. But yet, in the real estate world, in the sales world in general, there's just a lot of bullshit.
Yeah.
Because it's a game. You know, so the thing that is really fascinating about you is that you have one foot in of both of these worlds that are so different. And I've always wanted to. I don't think I've ever asked you, even out of a podcast, just in normal life. But do you have psychological things that you do? Do you have games that you play in order to be successful? Like, do you have a plan, or are you just straight up? Because a lot of salespeople, they fucking stink, man. Like I just have such an allergy to salespeople because they're, I guess what I'm talking about is these, what I refer to as charity muggers. You know, when you're walking through the mall and someone goes, "Hey man, how are you?" And you just think, okay, I'm just going to respond like a person, but they trick you into having a normal conversation, but it's not that. They're trying to take your money.
Yeah.
You know, but they pretend that they're not trying to take your money, which immediately is like, I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah. And everybody feels it, it's like, you're not fooling anyone, it's like maybe it's in the 80s, it's like all this, all these tricks, how to win friends and influence people, all these like seminars that people do, nobody really knew what the NLP, like all that stuff was like, ooh, new and fresh, that people didn't know what was going on. People now, they know, right? So for me, it's like, so to answer your question, there are games that I play in the sense of like how to approach certain things. Not really, like to the credit of psychedelics, like you said, you really need to be comfortable with who you are to jump into that world. I think having jumped into that world to the degree that I have, comes from being comfortable with myself to jump in it, but by jumping in it and facing all these things I've gone through, reinforcing that comfort of who I am, right? So one begets the other. And so through that, my biggest thing is authenticity, right? I just want to be authentic. Do I, hold back on my passion for psychedelics if I'm selling a house to a conservative Jewish woman in Beverly Hills? Yeah, probably. If she asks me about it, am I going to lie? No.
Yes.
I had this,
you just don't have to come out with it in the first greeting.
Exactly. So I had this a perfect example of it. It was with this guy that I met through a friend of mine. She was like, introducing me to him. Sorry, this thing's stuck here. She was introducing me to him. And I knew he had a $40 million house that he was trying to sell. He had tried to sell it. It had expired. And the listing, like he's open to selling it again. And she introduces me to him and, had a little moment. And then I ran into him the next day at a party, coincidentally. And we're at the party and we're, one of those parties. And we're all on, substances or whatever. And I got to talking, hey, good to see you again, blah, blah. And we were talking, and like this billionaire guy, he's worth, 4 or 5 billion or whatever, traveled the world, obviously well-to-do, in the rooms and circles of all the greats, whatever.
But this time you've got your war paint on and you're wearing
my Burning Man things. Exactly. I'm like fully activated. But we just dove into a really good conversation and he's like, just having a nice heartfelt connection. And he's like, I got to say, man, like, I'm really impressed with you. Like, I like your vibe. Like, you're so cool. It's very rare that I meet someone that's blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and, unlike these people here are all on drugs, like, I just feel like you're blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there like, okay, do I be honest with like, hey, on that note, I'm on it right now. Or do I try and go for the listing and try to be like more, play out to what he would expect his agent to be,
what he wants you to be.
Exactly. So I said, it's interesting you say that because, I don't consider what I do drugs, but, I do partake in psychedelics, blah, blah. In fact, I'm on it right now, blah, blah. And he's like, what? And he was like so surprised. And he was like, we had this kind of like deep debate for like 45 minutes. Like friends were coming to say hi to me at the party. Oh, hey, Stefan. He's like, no, we're talking. Like we were just kind of like dialed into this thing. And he was trying to tell me, like, dude, you don't need this stuff. Like, you're a cool dude. You don't need this. Like, why are you, what is the dependency? Like, I said, first of all, I don't see it as a dependency. I don't see it as a need. I see it as a tool. Like I said, how did you get here tonight? He's like, well, I took the car. I'm like, why, dude? Come on. You're a healthy guy. You can walk home. Why'd you take the car? He's like, well, it's quicker and more effective and more efficient. I'm like, that's how I see psychedelics. Sure, I can get there in certain ways and meditate in an ashram for, 20 years. I still do that on top of these things. But to me, this allows me to, to get to these places and learn about myself in a more efficient way. And I said, look at you. Before you even, before you knew all this, you were just saying how much you connect with all this stuff. So whatever it's bringing out in me or whatever it's taught me, apparently it's doing well. Like you're resonating with it, right? Kind of thing. And so we kind of just went back and forth for a while, and he never quite saw it that way yet. I mean, at that time, but we kind of like agreed to disagree. But we had a great, respectful debate, and we ended like with a big hug and all that stuff. We kept in touch, and then months later, he's going through a breakup, and he calls me. He's like, "Hey, kind of curious about what you were saying. Like maybe this could help me, blah blah blah, all that stuff." But the point I'm trying to make here is at that moment of like, do I, if you don't ask me, I will, I may not be, I may adjust who how I come across to certain people just to be respectful of the brand, of course, the agency that I work at, and just like, being appropriate in any given social setting. But if you ask me, I'll be authentic. And so I remember having that cusp where if I acted like, and by the way, I never got the listing. I had it as an off market. It still hasn't sold yet, but maybe down the road I'll get it. But I remember thinking to myself, if I pretend to be like, yeah, look at these guys, on the drug, oh yeah, unlike us. And then let's say I don't get the listing, I feel like I will have sold my soul for nothing.
Yes.
At least this way, if I don't get the listing, then at least I lost it being authentically me. And I want to deal with people that are authentic and that want me for me. And there's a lot of people out there that think similar, that see the beauty and the benefits of psychedelics, that are also selling $20 million houses. I'd rather just deal with you. Like if I lose you because of who I am, I'll gain someone else because of who I am. And so if you have to change hats and be, now I'm the conservative Jewish kid. Now I'm the sporty, whatever guy, preppy guy. Now I'm the, whatever. Like I'm me, respectfully, for the environment that I'm in. And whatever that brings, however that resonates with, whoever that resonates with, that's the environment I want to work with. And I happen to be a pretty badass real estate agent on top of that. It's not like, because I'm a burner, do deals with me. No, on top of that, in between all my psychedelic adventures, I'm on point and I get shit done. Right. So hire me for that first and foremost. And if we happen to resonate or on the other things, great. But if you have to keep switching hats, then you start to lose who you are. You're bouncing from one. Oh shit! What did Mark think I was? Oh, how did I? Oh my god! It's like
that would just be so stressful.
Yeah,
well, because there's that other option that could have happened. Let's say you lied to him about who you were to make him happy, and then you got the listing. Well, then you got to keep up that facade, and then it's like,
or he finds out. Somebody. Oh, Steph. Oh, dude, he's big into mushroom or whatever. Like now he won't be able to trust me because like. At least you know what you're getting with me. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't trust you. And that's the thing. Like if you're going to, when you make that decision, you got to be prepared. You're selling yourself out.
Yeah.
And good for you for doing that. That was a really great answer, man. Because I think that the opposite is what I am referring to in a lot of people who are in sales, because you can smell it a mile away. If you're self-aware enough, you can smell it a mile away, and they're lying to you. It's just lies. That's the thing that gets me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, especially when it comes, it's one thing about, someone wanting me to sign up to a constant monthly charity in the mall. That irks me enough. It's not that I don't want to be charitable, but you know what I mean? They're lying to me to try and get my money. But when it comes to buying a house, and it's like, this is all of the money that I have. This is a huge decision for me and my family and my personal life. And the real estate agent is bullshitting me. Yeah. It's like, do you have any idea how disgusting that is? This is a massive thing. Like it would be for you. It would be for anyone.
And it's very
not
personal,
be able to trust
the
them.
Home. Yeah, especially for your home. The home is your sanctuary. It's your home. It's your the most intimate thing that you purchase usually. And so you need that. You need that full transparency and trust, which is why, I inadvertently get a lot of deals from Burning Man or ayahuasca ceremonies or whatever, because you are nobody asks and nobody knows what you do out there. Right? You just have a moment, and when you come back in the default world, you're like, oh, so what do you? Oh, you're an agent. Hey, actually, I'm looking to sell my house. Because now, everything about each other out there, because everything's stripped down to the raw, basic, connections,
human level.
If it's heightened with psychedelics, it's the purest, most raw form with no ego, no, preconceived notions, no agendas. It's raw. And so when you connect in that way, and then you come back out into the regular world with all the other stuff that comes back into life, all the social politics and all that stuff, you already have that very fundamental connection and foundation of a friendship, which, like you said, is that trust, which
That's
is
huge.
best formed in those environments.
Yeah, especially when you're about to make probably one of the biggest financial decisions that a person can make. Yeah, you want to be able to trust the person you're doing it with. And luckily for me, when we sold our apartment and bought this house, both agents the one we sold with and the one we bought from, were really, really lovely guys, really genuine, lovely guys. There was a moment where I thought the guy we bought this place from was fucking with me because we'd been back and forth, and he was super sweet. And then something happened where there was an auction, right? And I was on the phone because I was in Sydney, and there was one other person at the auction for this house that we're in now, and nobody bid. And I didn't bid because I was like, all right, cool, let's just leave this and see, and then we can get, because I don't want to get into a bidding war with anything. And so the auction I don't know what happened. What happens when no one bids?
You guys is different, right? Like it's open bid. So if you offer like $1 million and somebody offers 1.1, you see that they offer 1.1.
Yes.
So it's all open.
Well, there's an auctioneer. There's a person who's running the auction, telling you this is what we're going to start at. Does anyone bid?
But then how do you do your? Sorry, it's a side note question, just logistics. How do you do your inspections and all that stuff? You do it before, or they just give you the report?
Yeah, you do it before. Well, no, sorry. For an auction, I think you need to do it. Fuck, that's a good question.
So you'll spend money on inspections and all that stuff on a house you might not get. So if you bid on 5 houses, you're doing 5 inspections. Maybe it's I'm confused. Maybe what you do is there might be a stipulation that it's on inspection, subject to inspection. Yeah. I have no idea actually. I know we did one, but I'm so confused now. You forget the process.
Actually, no, I think you might have to do it before. I'm confused.
We have auctions here for like foreclosures and stuff like that. And if it ever goes to auction, it's all done before, or they present you with inspections that they did themselves. Yeah.
So this auction. So this auction happened and nobody bid. I don't know what happened. I don't know what you call that, but it just didn't. And then I was like, sweet, I'm going to call the agent tomorrow and tell him, and then put in an offer, because the ball was really in my court then, because I was the most interested party.
Yeah.
And so I call him and he doesn't answer. I'm like, that's cool. He's got things on. I text him, give me a call. Doesn't call me. Later in the day, I call him. Doesn't answer. I'm like,
So sorry, this is the agent representing the seller, right?
Yes.
How it works.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the next day, I call him. Doesn't answer. This goes on for like 3 days. I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Does he and I start to freak out. I'm like, we're going to lose this house. He's found someone else. I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking there's all these fucking mind games I'm starting, because he was so nice. I was like, I hate this guy. I can't believe he's doing this to us. And then he'd accidentally blocked me on his phone because he's not very good with tech.
Really? Oh my
So the
God.
poor guy had just and he was doing the same thing. He was trying to figure out what was going on. He's like, "Oh, Mark's gone really quiet. This is really sad."
Really?
And he's like, "Why is he not calling me?" And I think, and so then I ended up calling him off Laurel's phone, and he answered, and I was like, "Dude," and,
what
and then
the
he
hell?
told me that, and I was like, "What's going on, man?" And then he checked the phone. He goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've accidentally blocked you."
Really? So it might have worked in your favor, because now he's like, oh, this guy doesn't, you know what? We'll sell it to you for half price or whatever.
Yeah, I think it kind of did. It actually ended up working really well. But that was funny. So that was, the point that's, it's interesting to hear you say that you just warts and all, obviously the individual.
It's selfish, because I don't want to manage the bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth to manage all the different character, whatever. To me, it's like,
if you've ever hung out with someone who is have you ever met someone who's like a proper liar, like a compulsive liar?
Yeah,
it's
I'm
weird,
actually impressed. It's weird, but I'm impressed how they can keep all the balls in the air.
Yeah,
until they drop one and it falls apart. But I'm impressed with the creativity around the lot. That's a big you should be a writer, write a movie. Like, it's like all the different moving parts and all the different storylines lining up with stuff. And I'm like, how are you? Wow. Very creative.
It's amazing. It really is amazing, isn't it? But I think the thing is, they're always very transient in their friendships. You notice how like as soon as you kind of cotton on, at least for me, as soon as I cotton on that this person's lying, I'm like, you kind of either very savagely or slowly just cut them out. That just keeps happening to them. So that's how they can keep doing it, because they move on to a new chunk of friends who until they figure it out, and then they move on to another one.
Bouncing around.
It
seems like a
Ponzi
scheme. You just move around.
Yes. It's a weird existence, man. But good, and that's why you've been able to do it successfully for 18 years.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
They're just like,
it's an interesting industry. I mean, obviously there's pros and cons. There's a lot of cons. Sometimes I feel like I was a bit more shrewd, a bit more of an asshole. I'd be further along, because you'll see some agents that do kind of play the games. They might get more, one-off deals, where like, you might burn the bridge, you won't deal with that guy again, but at least you got that sale, like getting a listing that's overpriced. And sometimes I'll be like, house that's like, we have one that's coming on that's worth maybe 12, maybe 10, maybe 12, 11. They want 16. And in my head, I'm like, it's not going to sell for 16. Do I take it at 16? Like a lot of these guys do, oh yeah, we can sell it. No problem. Then you chop the price down later and sell it for 10, or do I sell it at 10? And be honest with you,
that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. That's a really, because we can. They lie. That's a lie straight up. They know that it's not going to, and then they're going to wear you down on your
just chip away at it.
Whereas, the value, and this is a very adult thing that people have to learn. But the value is really in saying, I need to be honest with you. You are not going to make that money. And people are that's going to sting, but it's going to be so much more healthy for them in the long run.
Yeah.
You're not going to get 16 for that.
Yeah. And like I had that with a really good friend of mine, that I think we had quoted him at 10.5, and he listed it for 18. And he went with an agent that, at the time Compass was doing, like, they would front you the money to like remodel it a little bit, fluff it up. So he spent like $200,000 fluffing it up, which to me is pointless, because this house needed work anyway. Whoever's going to buy it is going to rip out the floors, repaint it, and redo the bathrooms anyway. So you're throwing good money at that money.
Facelift isn't going to help it.
Yeah. And he spent the $250 on it. Then he had it on the market for a year. He had to move out and rented for $20,000 a month for a year, and then ended up selling it for 10.5, 10.8 or 10.3. Like, it was like a $300,000 difference from what we had said a year prior, with the $250 you spent and the $20,000 a month per year. But you still fill it with that agent. And in my head, I'm like, you're condoning that kind of behavior. What you should say, what I always say, like, listen, if they can sell it for 18, by all means, go with them. But if they try to chop the price down to what I'm telling you, cancel the listing with them and call me. Don't condone that behavior for fucking wasting your time and your money and your effort. Like, because of course, I'll tell you 20. Yeah, I can list my condo here for $15 million. I could, technically speaking, I could put it in the MLS. Nobody's going to call me on it, but I can list it for whatever the fuck price I want. But it's a waste of time, So that's where sometimes I get a little frustrated with myself being, the more honest, like, should I just be? I'm not going to, obviously, because it's not worth the extra few bucks.
But it's tempting.
Pretty good life. But it's like, it's like when you lose it, I'm like, oh my God, okay, I can tell you that bullshit if you want. I'm trying to do us all a favor here. But you see that happen, and they ultimately get the sale because they get worn out. They chop the price down, and they sell it. But do you want to take that path? It's like, so there's pros and cons to all things.
Well, I guess I hadn't given this as much thought, but you're certainly dealing with greedy sellers as well at times.
Yeah, of course.
Really greedy people who are, assholes who are selling, who are just.
And a lot of egos, right? Especially at the high end stuff. There's celebrity clients, you have business managers, you have this, you have that. So everyone's trying to prove their worth, right? If the business manager comes in and says, oh yeah, no, everything's fine. They're like, well, what am I paying you for? Like, I don't really need you. Right. So they always try and like pick on little things that are irrelevant just to show that they're doing something, Dude, it's fine. Just stay out of the way.
The game.
Good. Everyone's
the
an
wank.
expert. Yeah. Everyone saw $1 million listing or some real estate show and they're all experts. This is worth it. Dude. Yeah. So, but it's all good. It's a good problem to have, right? Because when it does close, they're good checks here. So, and it's nice to, I try to appreciate, like I had a really cool listing that never ended up selling, but it was an honor to at least have that listing, right? Rather than being like, oh, fuck, it didn't sell. It's like, wow, at least I had a shot at that. Or, I remember taking a celebrity out, and it was like this $40 million house in Beverly Hills. And I'm sitting there, and it was like last minute because, sometimes these celebrities are in town for whatever. And I was sat down for dinner with Umberto and Lane. I'm like, yeah, get the call. He's like, I want to see this house. I'm like, fuck, guys, sorry. Here's my credit card. I got to run, shoot over there. And he didn't ultimately buy it. But rather than being frustrated, like I just left the dinner, I showed him so many houses. Like I remember thinking, like, this is cool. Like for me to be here with, A-list celebrity, big actor guy, like for me to be here showing a $40 million house in Beverly Hills, just this moment itself is kind of cool coming from, Montreal, not knowing anyone here. And so here I am, and just in this environment is cool. Right. So rather than being frustrated with some of these things that can be frustrating, especially when you're so close to a big sale and you don't get it, to just pull back and be like, just this moment is kind of cool for me. If I step back and think, if you told me at 18 in Montreal that I'd be here showing, Mr. X, huge movie star, a $40 million house in Beverly Hills. Yeah, I'd take that moment, even if you didn't make the sale, And so I try to like pull back and just appreciate the little moments as they're happening. And if they sell, that's a better bonus, obviously. Like I sold that, the Powerball guy, his $25 million house. The guy that won the $2 billion Powerball, like that was random. Like, okay, that's a cool story. His proof of funds was a picture of the winning ticket. Cause like, I'm like, this guy, fucking ponytail, flip flops, a 30-year-old kid from like Altadena. Shit. He was like, I want to see this house. And then normally I'm like, proof of funds, and like, show me them like a winning lottery ticket. I'm like, I guess somebody could have faked it, but if somebody's going through that much effort, all right, I'll show them the house.
Let's come see the house, kid.
Or whatever. Like, all right. So so like random things like that. It's just like, and that one is so. I thought that was totally bullshit. That was going nowhere. And he's like, okay, he makes an offer. I'm like, okay, I'm still waiting for the. I'm sorry, like. California Lotto hasn't paid. Like there were some disagreements about paying out because he didn't want his name to be out there. All this stuff, and I'm like, all right, it sounds like an excuse when push. When you're putting pen to paper, I'm like, all right, it's bullshit. Then he wants to come see it again. I'm like, whatever. And so it wasn't until the money hit escrow that I believed it. But I obviously have to do right by my sellers to explore an opportunity that could potentially be true. But I was completely expecting that to be bullshit because I had a similar deal like a month prior with some bullshit buyer that opened up escrow, did inspections, but never wired them. Weird. People are just weird. I don't know what to get out of it. But this one actually hit, and he bought it, closed, and I'm like, oh, that was cool. So, you got to enjoy the moments as they come. Otherwise, if you're so leveraged or you're so hedged on this one thing happening that doesn't, you're devastated. And if you're too bitter, like, oh, that'll never happen, you don't do the showing and you miss the opportunity. So it's that fine balance. Doesn't mean that I don't have days where I'm, in those both scenarios where I'm just frustrated, like, fuck this. But for the most part, I try to like enjoy the journey, kind of like the fires, just enjoy it for what it is. And it's not going to happen again. You could be devastated or you could be excited and intrigued. So
dude, this is why Graham Hancock's idea of making all politicians have to do, was it 7 or 12 ayahuasca ceremonies before they're allowed to, be a politician or like the fact that you are bringing a sense of authenticity and gratitude to a very greedy industry. Yeah, I mean, it's almost certainly. Well, we can't make it. Give it all the credit to psychedelics, but
a lot of it, though, honestly, a lot of it. I mean, all the books I read, I've been on this path since I was 13 years old. My parents, I was reading Tony Robbins when we were 10, 12, 13 years old. A lot of Medino, Brian Tracy, all the original, Jim Rohn, which was Tony Robbins' original mentor. So like we were making vision boards when we were like 9 years old. So obviously that upbringing and all that stuff, but you also have to do the work and then dial it in and then, level up
you gotta live it.
Playing field. You got to live it and all this stuff. Burning Man, right? Like those are great environments that really push you and test you with like minimal resources. How do you make shit happen with nothing? Like, are you going to sit there and bitch when the sun comes out and the dust is blowing and you're dry and you're shitting in a porta potty? That's like, how are you going to handle all that stuff? Right? Like as an adventure, then everything just kind of becomes fun. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and it's no surprise to me that the guy you at the party you were having that debate with, you didn't say to him a few weeks later, "Hey, listen, I think you're right. I think I've been making a mistake by taking psychedelics." Yeah. It went the other way. he was like, "Hey, listen, man, I've been thinking about what you were saying."
Yeah, because he realized like he lost a girl that he was in love with, and even his first marriage. Because I'm like, well, I said you were, because I knew he was divorced. I'm like, you were married, right? He goes, yeah. I said, well, what happened? I'm like, if your way is so good, how are you divorced? Like, why are you divorced? Didn't work out.
Yeah, how's it working out for you?
Yeah, like he's like, well, blah blah. I'm like, maybe if you dropped some Molly and jumped on a journey with your ex-wife and talked things out. Now because a lot of times if I'm going through a disagreement with in a relationship, we do a little bit of Molly. It just kind of like opens the heart. You're a little less snappy and judgmental. You're a little more receptive to hear criticism because you see it just like you do in psychedelics, where you're like, you're being shown certain things. Like, oh shit, that I do that. Like, yeah, maybe I am a bit of a this way or that.
Yeah.
You're more receptive to it because you're in this altered state. You're more open. So like maybe if you had done that, you might not have gotten divorced. Maybe you could have walked through it. Maybe not, but you could have at least tried that. Like if you're so judgmental, and I know that because I used to be that, right? I used to do nothing until ayahuasca at 30. But before that, I had huge judgments around all that stuff. Until I started reverse engineering. Like, wait a minute, if my way is so right, why am I not where I want to be? Why am I miserable? Why am I this? Maybe there's something to be.
These are hard questions to ask. They sting. These are painful questions. Yeah.
Not to justify, because there's the flip side of that where people are like, everything is medicine. Like Coke, that's medicine. It's like, well, easy there, easy. Like there's drugs, a balance,
and there's medicine. These are literally different things. Yeah.
And so you got to find the balance.
I'm sure you've met people who even the medicine. There are people who are. They just take that too far, and
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's all in the name of like medicine.
Yeah, and everything's woo woo, and they're not. They just leave everything up to just trusting the universe with everything, and and it's okay, cool. But what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's you have to do things.
If you haven't read the book "Stealing Fire," I highly recommend it. It's one of the books I've recommended the most. And they talk about, one of the things they talk about in the book, well, it's about how to induce flow states of consciousness, right? And they follow like the Navy SEALs, they follow psychedelics, Burning Man, they follow athletes, SEAL 16, whatever, like different ways of getting into that flow states of consciousness. And one of the things that they talk about is exactly what you're saying. They call them bliss junkies, right? It's the ones that go to the Tony Robbins seminar, and then 2 months later, the Joe Dispenza seminar, and then Esther Hicks seminar, whatever. And it's like, you're just, because you get that high when you go to you get all pumped up. And then when it comes down to like waking up at 5 a.m., doing your meditation and shoveling horse shit on the farm, whatever the day-to-day task is to get to where you're going, all of a sudden, that motivation's not there because you don't have 15,000 people screaming with you like, yeah, you can do it. So you go to the next seminar and you get that next hit. So after, and I've been guilty of that too, where you kind of haven't really quite implemented the things you've learned, and you go back for the next ceremony, and she's like, "No, I'm not showing you anything. Why? You didn't do anything with what I last showed you." It's like, okay, sorry, shit, okay, revert, go back. So I get that, right? But we got to be realistic and honest with ourselves as to what why are we doing the next one before we have implemented the things prior?
Yes.
So we all find our balance, and we all ebb and flow with that, obviously. But we just need to be honest with ourselves as to where we are on that path. I think for ourselves, not for anyone else. You don't need to go and tell you, oh, I did that. Like when no one's looking, when you're by yourself, when there's no one to lie to or impress or show off to, like what's really going on with yourself.
What's the actual truth?
Yeah, exactly.
Not how do you feel about the truth? What is the actual truth?
Yeah. And what are you doing about it? Yeah.
It's good stuff, man. It's always a good time chatting with you, brother.
Yeah, same, man. It's so good and we haven't actually even caught up prior to this, so it's kind of like a nice. Yeah. It feels like no time has passed. It feels like we're in the hot tub like we used to be, just kind of catching up here. That's right. Like, what are you doing? What's new?
Yeah, and just like in the hot tub, I got no pants on either.
Yeah, never. I wanted to get into that state.
Bro, it's great to see you, man. Thank you.
As well.
Thanks
for having me. It's an honor to be on again. And so, and it's really cool to see how far you've taken this, because I think when we first did it, it was more just audio. But I've been watching some of your stuff and like some of the really cool, interesting people you have on too. So,
thanks, man.
Kudos to you on taking it and being consistent with it and everything else. So,
appreciate it, mate. Yeah. I'm glad you survived the fires, even though, fizzing around on your motorbike and going to places you're not supposed to go and sharing the wisdom, brother.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks for having me on.
Man.
Be well. All right.
See you,
man. Later.